Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Adam Freill. I'm the editor of Onsite Magazine, and I'll be acting as the panel moderator during this 60-minute discussion that aims to provide us with an informative snapshot of Canada's infrastructure sector. And we're also going to try and provide a little bit of a preview of what we can expect in the coming weeks, months, and years through the construction lens. Our title sponsor for today's event is LBX Company. Famous for its link belt line of machinery, LBX develops, markets, sells, and supports excavators, forestry equipment, and material handlers. Headquartered in Lexington, Kentucky, LBX Company has dealers throughout Canada, the United States, and other areas of North and South America. And one of the things that I noticed with the company is they list building stronger communities as its core purpose. And that aligns really well to today's discussion, since strong communities rely on infrastructure, and building of those foundational elements of our cities and towns really relies on productive, reliable, and efficient machines. So I encourage you to visit the LBX website or visit one of their dealers to check out their equipment lines. And I'd like to really thank them for sponsoring today's panel discussion. Without their support, we would not be able to put on this snapshot of infrastructure. And before we get started with our panel, I have a few little housekeeping notes that might help viewers navigate today's session. So you, the audience, you'll be in listen-only mode, and you'll be able to choose between either seeing a full screen view of the person who's speaking or a panel view where you'll be able to see all of our panelists at the same time. You can select the style that you prefer by using your Zoom webinar controls, which are at the top of your window. And today's program, it'll consist of up to 45 minutes for our panel discussion, followed by about 10 minutes for audience questions. If you have questions, you can type those in at any time using the questions tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be keeping an eye out for those during the session, and we'll try to answer as many as time will permit. And then also, if you want to discuss today's event on social media, please use the hashtag OS infrastructure. So O as in on, S as in site, infrastructure as in infrastructure, to share your thoughts. So as mentioned, today's panel discussion is intended to provide a look at the state of infrastructure in Canada. And I'm looking forward to some great discussions about some major projects currently being built by Canada's construction sector, some potential new projects as we look ahead at upcoming opportunities in the sector, and taking some time to examine some of the needs of the sector. So I'm also going to welcome our panelists to share some notes about where their respective organizations fit into the sector and how we can work with them for the betterment of the sector. And really of Canadian society in general. Infrastructure is such a critical backbone for the Canadian economy and quality of life. So we have the very good fortune of having several key leaders from some of Canada's leading construction and infrastructure organizations bringing knowledge and analysis to today's discussion. So please join me in welcoming our panelists and thanking them for agreeing to share their insights. And I'll go alphabetically by last name. So joining us today are Chris Atchison, John Casola, Angela Clayton, and Mary Van Buren. Chris Atchison is president of the BC Construction Association, and in his role at BCCA, Chris drives dynamic initiatives that introduce progressive and necessary change to the industry while delivering value to all construction stakeholders. He oversees a number of successful programs and initiatives at BCCA and is passionate about promoting the construction industry as a high opportunity occupation with a place for everyone. He also drives advocacy initiatives, including lobbying of government, and sits on several key industry boards, forums, and councils. Welcome, Chris. John Casola is the Chief Investment Officer at Canada Infrastructure Bank. There he leads the investments team and is responsible for implementing the CIB's investment and advisory strategies. John and his team work with project sponsors from across Canada to develop project priorities and opportunities for partnerships with private and institutional investors. A recognized leader in the Canadian infrastructure sector, he has more than 20 years experience in project finance and public-private partnership, or P3 transactions, across a variety of infrastructure asset classes. He also has extensive experience advising both public and private sector organizations active in the infrastructure sector, and was instrumental in advising on many first-of-kind P3 projects in Canada. Welcome, John. Angela Clayton is the president of project delivery with Infrastructure Ontario. With more than 20 years of experience in the infrastructure sector, Angela has extensive experience working in both the public and private sectors in the areas of strategic planning, risk management, and program management. In her current role, she is responsible for overseeing the strategy, planning, and implementation of infrastructure projects across Ontario. Sorry, almost went national with you there. Sorry. She's a passionate advocate for women in the infrastructure sector and actively seeks ways to make meaningful contributions to her community through her involvement in industry associations and volunteer efforts. Welcome, Angela. And Mary Van Buren is the president of the Canadian Construction Association, a position she's held for the past 6 years. As the first female president in the association's more than century-long history, she's guided the CCA into a new era that is digital first and inclusive. Under her leadership, CCA has developed an expanded focus on innovation and best practices. While her impact on the association is evident, her unwavering commitment to engagement stands as the bedrock of her success at CCA and its impact on Canada's construction sector. In her steadfast dedication to collaboration, she has strengthened the relationship with CCA's 62 partner associations and developed new strategic partnerships that have elevated the profile of the national construction industry. She's also been a strong advocate for Canada's infrastructure sector with all levels of government. Welcome, Mary. And thank you all for joining us. I'm looking forward to your insights into this critical segment of Canada's construction landscape. And with that, I think I'm going to start picking on people with questions. So that's the nature of the board. So I know I outlined some of their experiences, but I'd really like to allow each panelist to share a little about themselves and their organization. So I'll start with Chris, and then we'll go to John, Angela, and Mary, asking for a cocktail party style introduction or a 60-second elevator speech that gives us a brief overview, including, if applicable, some of the key infrastructure work their organization's been a part of, either historically or over the past year or two, their choice. And it could be notable projects, work on funding models, lobbying efforts, anything along those lines. So Chris, I'll start you off. How's your organization been focused on Canada's infrastructure sector?
Great. Thanks very much for having me, Adam. Pleasure to be here amongst such an esteemed panel. Just as a reminder to everyone, the BC Construction Association, we're a provincial not-for-profit association representing contractor members in the construction industry in the industrial, commercial, institutional, and multi-unit residential realms. We're an agnostic provincial voice for construction in British Columbia, and historically our efforts have been deep-rooted in solutions-based advocacy, both for the industry and for the workforce development strategies that we bring to our sector. So it's important that we recognize British Columbia's infrastructure, and it forms the backbone of our provincial economy. But to sum up what BCCA does, I'd like to highlight one project that we've been involved with for some time now, and that's the LNG Canada project, which is the largest privately funded infrastructure project in Canadian history. And it reached final investment decision in late 2018. And it's nearing completion right now of phase 1 in Kitimat in northwestern British Columbia. But I think what's important to note throughout this is that the BCCA has supported and worked with LNG Canada in a small but meaningful way on 2 workforce development projects that has helped upskill British Columbians in the skilled trades for the betterment of the 6 years of that project and leading up to it. And also working with the local community to place hundreds of what we would consider underrepresented segments of the population into high opportunity occupations. So that's one area where we're directly involved in promoting the industry and working with stakeholders. And then I'm just going to single out the advocacy engagement that we're involved with the Deputy Minister's Industry Infrastructure Forum, which is the greatest acronym in all of construction, DMIF. And BCCA is a co-chair on that panel, which is comprised of a multitude of industry representation and 6 primary infrastructure ministries of the provincial government, for which we consult and advocate and help to form best practices in policy. So the DMIF ensures that taxpayer investment remains fair, competitive, and transparent, and ever evolving for the best procurement practices. So it's part of the long game that we play and forms a key piece of how we interact and engage and lean on government relations for advocacy and infrastructure. So we never take our eyes off the infrastructure ball. It's embedded into our mission and our operations, as it's our members and our industry that's building this incredible array of infrastructure that we're seeing come online. And it's always been there, but we're seeing an incredible crush of projects that we're looking forward to talking to about today. And at the end of it all, we're here to serve and protect the livelihoods of the construction industry. So with that, I'm proud to be here representing the BC Construction Association amongst colleagues today.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And I'll turn to John. Same question. Fill us in on Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Great, Adam. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me here today. I'll try and capture a complex mandate really as briefly as I can. We are a federal crown corporation created by the federal government with a seed money of $35 billion. We have $35 billion to spend across 5 priority sectors. Those are public transit, clean power, which involves generation, transmission, and storage, green infrastructure, which involves carbon capture, low carbon fuels, our building retrofits program, which is very popular and being taken advantage of, broadband, and trade and transportation, which includes airports, ports, critical minerals, and irrigation infrastructure. So what do? We have all of this money. It was given to us or allocated to us on the basis that the infrastructure challenge in this country is too great for either the private sector or the public sector to tackle alone. That's the fundamental premise, and I think we probably get broad agreement on that. And so our mandate is structured so that we don't do grants. We are investors. We have lots of freedom anywhere in the capital structure, senior debt, subordinated debt, equity, hybrid type structures, including royalty type structures. We've structured and seen them all. But the premise really is that we need to invest in revenue generating infrastructure because we need to be repaid. And the second aspect of our mandate is we need to have private capital alongside us on every deal. And so they need to be repaid. And we are actually prohibited from investing in a project that doesn't have private or institutional capital alongside us. And so that is the mandate. That's something that we don't have discretion. And so we talk a lot about catalyzing and crowding in private sector capital, and we do so by identifying what the gaps are in the project. After determining that it's in mandate in one of our priority sectors, the first question we ask ourselves when we look at a new project is to ask, why do you need us? What is the problem that is preventing this project from being financed and being furthered in the normal way, in the regular financing channels? And for those of you who've ever heard me speak before, you'll know I try to explain this really simply. If you remember 2 words about everything that I say, the 2 words are gap filler. We are a gap filler. So we need to identify what gap is preventing the project from proceeding. And those can be things like affordability, why we offer concessional rates to the province of Nova Scotia on wind, on renewable energy, and on a recent battery storage deal. And we're doing the same throughout the country because ratepayers can't always support the cost, and particularly in those provinces where there aren't that many ratepayers available to actually absorb all of the costs, all the way up to what we very cleverly call the "if you build it, they will come" strategy, where the infrastructure is needed, and yet there's a ramp up that's at risk, puts it at risk, and so traditional lenders generally won't take that ramp up risk. They want to see the line to revenue generation and have that locked in. We'll take that risk. We are patient capital. We are created to take more risk than is ordinarily out there, and in that way, we have structured deals to smooth or take away some of that risk that create sufficient comfort for other private sector lenders and institutional capital to come in alongside us. So that's basically what we do. We are an impact investor. So traditionally, you talk to any private sector investors and everyone's got an ROI. We have an ROI too, but our R, it's always tricky to say, our R is impact. And so we have outcomes. And so we don't measure return on our investments. We measure GHG emissions reduction on a clean power deal. We measure ridership outcomes and modal shift on transportation deals. We measure connectivity to homes on broadband and GDP growth in ports and airports and things like that. So really important, that's what we look for. If there's no outcome that fits in our mandate, we won't do the deal. Last thing I'll say, recent examples, so diverse across the country. We are really proud of a deal we did a couple of months ago in Thompson, Manitoba, northern Manitoba. We got a deal that was stuck. The airport there was stuck. It was basically sinking into the permafrost, was not going to happen. And we came to the table and helped to actually provide the funding and structure it in a way that made that work. It's a gateway to the north for many northern Indigenous communities. And already, we've closed the deal. They're already building. Already, other businesses are starting to form around that airport, knowing that it's going to be built. So that's great. Just the last one I'll talk about is Nova Scotia Energy Storage Project, which we closed last week. That's the biggest battery storage project in Nova Scotia. And two key things about that is really another means for furthering and advancing renewables in Nova Scotia, really important to clean up what is now a very dirty grid. But hearts and minds are in the right place, and we are speaking to all of the right people about changing that, and that's good. The other key milestone about that, which I haven't mentioned yet, is it's the first time we have used our program called the Indigenous Equity Loans Program. We actually provided an equity loan to the Mi'kmaq, 13 different Indigenous groups in Nova Scotia, so that they took a significant equity stake in that project. And that's a new product for us, and we hope to replicate that across the country, but that was the first one that we closed. So I'll stop there. I could go on forever. I'll stop there, and I'm sure there will be there'll be more to talk about later on. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And Angela, I'll ask you about Infrastructure Ontario. I know you've got a couple of projects as well, so I'll let you describe the organization and talk about what you guys do.
Yeah, we're a little busy these days, and thanks, Adam. Great to be here. So, Infrastructure Ontario is an agency of the province with a mandate to manage public infrastructure and real estate. And I'm the president of our project delivery team, and so my team acts as the lead for any major infrastructure project in the province. And so, since our inception in 2005, we've completed over 100 projects. And our current program of work is just under $80 billion and 61 projects. And I'll get into a little bit more what we actually have on the go in the market right now. And that includes our projects that are either in construction or in the transaction phase. We talk a lot about some of the challenges in the market. So there's three real main areas of focus for our organization right now. The first is the deployment of a broader variety of delivery models to facilitate a more balanced risk transfer. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about models and risk transfer. Those are kind of hot and prominent topics across the marketplace. We're also highly attuned to the constraints as far as market capacity goes. And so we're supporting efforts to manage and increase that market capacity, specifically in skilled trades, and also being very intentional about the timing of projects, when we're bringing them to the market, how much work we're putting out in the market at the same time. And of course, directly related to that is the third issue, which is managing significant cost escalations and making sure that we're still getting that value for taxpayers while continuing to move forward with this really aggressive infrastructure mandate for our government.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll turn to Mary to ask about the Canadian Construction Association.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Chris is one of our partner associations. So the Canadian Construction Association is a national association, and we represent civil general trade contractors as well as allied service providers and suppliers in Canada's industrial, commercial, institutional, and civil construction area, also with the overlap into the resi-commercial. Our partner associations working with CCA provide a very strong advocacy and service model to members and the industry, because together we align on key issues and we advocate to all orders of government. So there's a lot of strength in that. As you know, the Canadian economy, 2/3 of our economy depends on trade. And that trade depends also on high quality trade enabling infrastructure. And it's this trade that pays for the quality of life that we enjoy and the infrastructure related to that, whether that's schools, parks, hospitals, etc. And so one of the initiatives that we're very proud of is the Canada Trade Infrastructure Plan, which is an initiative we've been working on with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Western Canada Foundation, with the Canadian Infrastructure Corporation, and with the Western Canada Road Builders and the Canadian manufacturers and exporters to promote having a long-term trade enabling infrastructure plan. And this plan has received endorsement from premiers across Canada. So that's something that we're continuing to champion as part of our overall advocacy. A second important area for us is on workforce capacity, making sure that we have the workers we need today and in the future. And a big part of that is right now working on aligning the immigration and the way it's not really working to bring in the people that we need. And last but not least is modernizing procurement. So I was happy to hear Angela speak about fair procurement, because that's certainly something that we are also championing, and that whole collaborative early contractor involvement. So those are the areas that we're focusing on right now.
Excellent, thank you. And I think to get the ball rolling beyond just what the organizations are doing, I'd like to present a bit of a snapshot on where things stand today. So where's Canada's infrastructure sector going in the coming year? Are there any key projects that are hitting completion, new projects starting in the next 12 months, or possibly hitting, say, an RFP stage, something along those lines? What can contractors expect to see more in the coming year? Is it going to be more or less about the same versus what we've seen over the past year? So for this, I think I'd like to start with Angela, if that's okay.
Yeah, like I said, Adam, we're really busy. So in Ontario, the government's made a historic commitment of $185 billion in infrastructure spend over the next decade. And as the implementation agency, IO is really just focused on getting that done. So for specific projects that we're advancing over the coming year, we publish a pipeline. We update it regularly. That is available on our website. It was updated last December. So I would definitely point the audience to our website to take a look at the pipeline. But I will just highlight a few, provide a few highlights for work that we currently have planned or underway in the calendar year. So in terms of projects in construction, we have 29 projects that are in construction, with 9 of them reaching substantial completion this year. So 3 of those, there's the Davenport Diamond GO expansion project. There's the Grandview Children Treatment Center project, which is in Ajax, and also the site servicing that we're doing in St. Thomas for the Volkswagen battery plant that's being built out there. So that's 3 of the 9 projects that are going to reach completion this year. We have 8 projects that are currently in procurement or the transaction stage. A few of the big ones there, the Garden City Skyway, so the new bridge in St. Catharines. We have the tunneling project for the Yonge North subway extension, as well as a new hospital in Quinte. So that's 3 of the 8 that are in procurement right now. And then we have 24 projects that are in the pre-transaction stage, so that have government approval but haven't come to market yet. So that gets to my comment about sequencing and being really intentional about when and how we're bringing work to the market. And a few of those are phase 2 of the Peel Memorial Hospital redevelopment. There's the Ontario Science Centre new build that's going in Ontario Place. And then we also have phase 3 of OPP detachments. So that's a bundle of detachments that are going to be built across the province. And then on top of all of that, we have 19 projects that are in the planning stage. So these are projects that haven't secured government approval yet, but we're working with the various parts of government in terms of defining what those project requirements are and getting those ready to bring to market. So lots going on. That this government is definitely all in on infrastructure, and so we've been really busy trying to figure out how to execute this really ambitious agenda.
Yeah, and one of the things that's always stood out to me in this sector is just the long lead times on from the concept to opening the doors or allowing traffic through or anything like that is such a long period of time for sure. Mary, can I get your thoughts on what we're going to see for the next 12 years on the infrastructure side?
Yeah, we're very optimistic at the pipeline. Angela spoke to Ontario and the leadership there, and we're seeing that for premiers in other provinces as well. Premier Canoe, for example, is also quite committed to investing in infrastructure for the province of Manitoba and others as well. And although we did have some headwinds, of course, we've seen inflation that was mentioned, interest rates, continuing supply chain disruption. But despite that, when we look at some of the other indicators, for example, labor shortage, Build Force, continues to be predicting that given the pipeline of projects that they know of, so these are committed projects, we're still expecting to see a shortfall of workers. So we are gearing up for that, and we're excited by it, but there will certainly be a lot of projects. As some of the residential investments that have been put on hold, we do expect to come onto market with easing of easing of the interest rates. So all in all, we expect a good amount of projects coming to the Canadian market.
Excellent, thank you, Chris. I'll get your thoughts on this if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things Mary mentioned, the workforce, and we've been blessed in British Columbia for the last number of years with some major infrastructure projects that have been ongoing. The aforementioned LNG Canada project, of course, the complementary Coastal GasLink project, our Site C project up in the Northeast, and Trans Mountain Pipeline. And I would say those are 4 major projects that have been ongoing in British Columbia for some time, but they are all past peak construction. And so there's been some concern in the past number of years raised that as those projects mature and near completion, we need to backfill with new projects in order to retain that workforce. And in fact, what we've seen happen in the last couple of quarters is a significant exodus from British Columbia of skilled workers, not all necessarily attributed to those projects specifically, but more of an indication that people are on the move. And when we see workforce leaving British Columbia, going to other opportunities in other provinces, that's a concern for the ambitious slate of new projects and ongoing projects that we have in place. So there's been a little bit of a gap, like as these projects have, the ones that I've mentioned and some others have passed that peak. We haven't done as good a job as we could in British Columbia in filling that need, even though we're incredibly ambitious with the number of hospitals and schools and highway projects that are being done. It hasn't filled that void, and thus we've had a net loss of workers in the construction industry. And that's something that we need to work hard to make sure that we retain that workforce for all provinces, quite frankly. And Mary mentioned immigration. That's a big focus for us for the future, making sure that we're attracting the skilled workforce from not just other provinces in BC. We don't want to continue to cannibalize each other's economy within this nation, but we know that there are hundreds of thousands of workers who are aspiring to come to Canada and contribute, and we're continuing to make that difficult for them. So that's kind of a concern that we've seen, but what we have, recent announcement by the provincial government of investing in hydro, a 10-year capital plan of $36 billion, and that will, more details on that will be unfolding. but that is meant largely to replace or to continue with the workforce continuation of what we've built up with investments in Site C. And that's a 50% increase over BC Hydro's previous capital plan. And in terms of electrification and emissions reduction, it's increased tenfold. That represents, about 10,000 jobs, so that's significant. I don't need to talk about LNG Canada anymore, but there is a proposed phase 2 for that project, which we would, we would welcome. I think that would double their capacity. We've got some major bridges and the Fraser River Tunnel project that's coming online, and one that's that I'd like to point to is probably a few years away from procurement yet, but the Cascadia high-speed rail project that would link Vancouver to Seattle and Portland. There's a lot of discussion in the back rooms right now in Victoria and in Seattle in Washington State and Oregon about this high-speed rail connection that would connect the economies and the populations of the Northwest Corridor. So lots to be excited about, lots of ambitious projects, and then couple of that with the infrastructure that's going to be required nationally for the housing strategy. These are big and specialized projects, so lots going on in British Columbia.
Excellent, thank you. And John, I don't know if you want to chime on this as well, or
yeah, just a couple of points. I think I just want to reinforce the points made by my fellow panel. I mean, it is get overly colloquial, busy as hell out there. I mean, all across the country, we are seeing unprecedented, and I've been in this business a long time. We are seeing unprecedented levels of activity and deals. I was reminded by one of my colleagues that today we're releasing our Q3 results, and it'll show that to date, we have closed on almost 60 infrastructure projects worth over $12 billion. And that means infrastructure along with private capital worth close to $35 billion across the country. Last year, we closed 26 deals. This year, we're on pace to close over 30 deals. And when I look at my pipeline next year, it just keeps growing. And there's a variety of sizes. And the thing I love about what we do is it's not focused on one sector. It really is spread across the country and across different sectors. So providing opportunities for all of the entire sector and the trades across the country and all of the rest of it. I think for next year, what I'm keeping my eye on, of course, is as we go towards our climate goals, we go towards like clean power, lots of carbon capture and storage projects out there, trying to figure out the regulatory environment and how they're going to get to market. But I have a high degree of confidence they're going to figure that out, and we're going to come to market. I think next year for low carbon fuels will be a banner year. A couple of the big ports are going to start construction in the next little while. Both one on the East Coast and one on the West, at least one on the West Coast. So really optimistic about the pipeline and the sector in general. The biggest worry, what keeps me up at night is where we're going to find the people to do it, not the ambition to actually get it done.
excellent, thank you. And I'll build from your discussion that these projects are of all different sizes, and that I find it's really easy to focus on large projects, major bridges, tunnels, power plants, but there are a lot of smaller projects that impact communities across Canada as well. So I'd like to open the door to a discussion a little bit about these other projects, those ones that can range from a few $1 million to say $150 million. So they're not into the billions yet. Is Canada keeping up with the infrastructure needs at this level? And how important are these non-mega projects to Canada's economy and the health and well-being of Canadians? And I'll start with Chris, because you mentioned a few things that are coming online there in BC in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I mentioned some big ones that are coming online, but there's a plethora of projects that are underway, and some of these are even eclipsing that $150 million or approaching that $1 billion mark. But the number of hospital projects, the Caribou Memorial Hospital, the Burnaby Hospital Phase 2, and the BC Cancer Centre project, the Mills Memorial Hospital up in the Northwest, and we've got lots of highway and road infrastructure projects as well. The Kicking Horse Canyon project, phase 4, Steveston Interchange project. We've got a terminal replacement happening here in Victoria with the Belleville terminal. Then we've talked about, or we should be talking about, the Broadway subway project and the Surrey Langley SkyTrain projects, not to mention a YVR cargo expansion of their facilities, almost almost doubling their facilities there. But to answer your question, Adam, I mean, each one of these projects plays a crucial role in supporting economic growth in the province and, in fact, the nation, and improving the quality of life and ensuring infrastructure resilience. I think it's so important for the communities in which these things are occurring, and when it comes to horizontal infrastructure as well, connecting the communities, especially in a province as geographically diverse as British Columbia. So these are substantial projects, not just for the communities they serve. It allows small, medium-sized contractors to participate, to then become that training ground almost, to become active participants in the competitive landscape for larger projects. So that's an important for the economic competitiveness, the economic resilience of the construction economy. But also what we're seeing is these are significant legacy building projects as well. They aren't just projects that people get involved with and then they forget their building. We see that all of these significant infrastructures are leaving behind community and provincial legacy, and that's important. And I think that John made the point earlier that there seems to be a crush, there seems to be an urgency right now, that the ball's been kicked down the field long enough and now it can't be avoided anymore. And that's great news for industry. But along with that comes additional pressures on an industry that's striving to build its workforce for the demand that it's facing as we're seeing more and more people retire. So there is pressures that come along with this, and we can't deny that this urgency or this desire for infrastructure investment to continue, it's going to put pressure on those that you're counting on to build. And we just need to be realistic about that and factor it in to the decision-making processes.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And Angela, can I get we've gone out west. Let's go more into the middle of the country and a view from Ontario.
Sure. Yeah. And I agree completely with Chris. I think that the large, big mega projects get a disproportionate amount of attention. It's just natural. But like many jurisdictions across Canada, Ontario has a significant portfolio of deferred maintenance and capital repair work that needs to happen across the existing portfolio. And that supplies work to a very significant, important segment of the market that don't work on our major infrastructure projects. And so we partner closely with organizations like the Ontario General Contractors Association and other groups that really support smaller and medium-sized firms within the province. And so we execute 2 programs of work that deal with kind of small and medium-sized projects. And so we have a capital repair program. We do about 2,000 projects annually. And those projects generally range from about 100,000 to 20 million. And those are typically life cycle repairs or minor renovations to existing assets. Sometimes there's really small new builds in there. And those are executed through our project management partner, Collier Project Leaders, who acts as our PM on those deals and runs the procurements for us. Then we also have projects that are in that mid-range, so kind of the $20 to $150 million projects. Those are what we consider small builds, and we execute those through a variety of delivery models, predominantly using traditional CCDC type contracts, but those are all competitively procured and managed by our in-house team of project management. So we think it's going to take the entirety of this market to execute this infrastructure agenda. And we're trying to make sure that there's work for all segments of the market by offering different project sizes across different asset classes with different delivery models and risk profiles to make sure that we're really tapping into as many different parts of the market as we can.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, Mary, I know I was going to get you to weigh in on this a little bit, but I think I'll pull you to our next question, because one of the things that was brought up in this answer was a discussion about the the existing needs of the current infrastructure that's in place. So we're looking at maintenance and renewal. So on that front, when it comes to Canada's existing roads, transit, waterworks, other infrastructure segments, what's the baseline of work that exists out there? Are we keeping up with that maintenance and renewal target? What's the picture look on that side of the fence?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not keeping up. We do have a significant infrastructure deficit. If you look at the Canadian Infrastructure Report Card, some of the stats are that 40% of our roads and bridges are in fair to poor or very poor condition. Between 30 and 35% of recreational and cultural facilities are in fair, poor, or very poor condition. 30% of our water infrastructure are in fair, poor, or very poor condition. So that's the infrastructure that already exists that we need a plan for. And so this really important to get this balance right and to be looking at a long term. Now we want to add on the acute housing crisis. And there's a significant amount of investment that will be required, not just to build a housing unit or a door, but the infrastructure that supports that. So, the clean water, the roads, the power, over time, fire stations, schools, etc. And the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has estimated that at about $107,000 per unit. So add that to the billions of dollars just to build housing. We're talking a huge investment just for housing. So the long-term planning, aligning the priorities, and going back to the earlier question about the small projects and medium, they are as essential to build capacity for all of the contractors. And sometimes what's happened is that an owner will try to bundle a whole bunch of projects into mega projects, which can then reduce the number of bidders on a project. So for owners to take on some of that risk in managing their portfolio, that's a good sign. And happy to hear that Infrastructure Ontario is doing that because we do need to invest in our aging infrastructure. We have to build that up to standard, and we have to have the dollars to invest in the new infrastructure. And certainly we were very incredulous when Minister Stephen Guilbeault said that, we don't need any new roads, that our infrastructure is fine. That was a shocking statement for us and does not square with the facts as we know them. So certainly we know that we also have to invest in our trade enabling infrastructure. So the demand for investment is high.
Excellent, thank you, Chris. How are things for the renewal and maintenance side out on the West Coast there?
Oh, it's in constant need of attention, and I think we've talked about the new projects that we have coming on board, and it is encouraging to see that. But as Mary said, and as the reports from the Canadian Construction Association have indicated, that the existing, the historical, but the critical infrastructure that we have is deteriorating. And we need to pay attention to that. We can't continue to neglect that. We need to work on these these new infrastructure projects and the existing infrastructure projects in tandem. They're not mutually exclusive. And so even based on our partners from the BC Road Builders and Heavy Construction Association recent report that there's 47,000 kilometers of roadways and highways in BC alone, with 2,900 bridges connecting communities in British Columbia. They all need maintenance. That needs maintenance. That doesn't just continue to endure the climate events that we're seeing in British Columbia. These structures and these roadways need to be maintained. They're there. They need investment to continue to connect communities, to continue to enable those trade corridors that we refer to very often. And in order to do that, we need to have the emphasis on this maintenance not only be prioritized, but be celebrated for the crews that do it, the skills that are required, the machinery that needs to be invested in. This is an investment in infrastructure that goes beyond what what people before us imagined we needed. It now goes towards preserving the livelihoods of people who need to continue to enhance what we already have. Otherwise, we'll lose it. And then we're just reinvesting and wasting money that needs to be spent anew versus maintaining with just proactive planning. So we don't want to lose that competitive advantage that we have as a nation, and we need to continue to build. And BC is a classic example of what we're experiencing out here with with climate events. We need to continue to invest in what we have and preserve what we have.
Excellent, thank you. Looking at the clock, I just want to make sure that we're touching on some of the other subtopics and that. So I'm going to leap ahead a little bit here, or quickly through some of this. But one of the things that Chris mentioned was about kind of a little bit of a wider view of everything. So I think that kind of leads into one of the points that I was curious about. Was I've heard some discussion about creating a kind of a national committee or an overseer at a federal level for infrastructure. And I'm curious to find out a little bit more about the idea, reason for it, maybe status of those discussions, anything along those lines for insights. And Mary, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to pick on you because it was a CCA event where I first heard about this. So I'll pick your brain on it.
Yeah, other countries, for example, UK, Australia, what they have established is an independent, objective body to inform the development of a long-term infrastructure plan. And these plans supersede any government of the day, any flavor of the day, because it's very challenging for any government who's in power, who's living in a 3 to 4 year election cycle, to really focus on that long-term plan. The urgent often, displaces the important. And so if we can have this long-term plan where any government, all governments are held accountable to Canadians, that will help us line up the workforce we need, make sure they're trained, we know what projects are coming. It will make sure we have the capital that we need as well. And so this would be very good for Canada. It would help us prioritize those projects because, again, sometimes we invest, we have the money and we're like, okay, we'll put it in this project because it's ready. But just because it's ready doesn't mean it is the most important project for us to invest in. So that's where we're recommending. So we would prioritize long-term, informed by an objective group of experts. We would focus on those are really priority projects. We would certainly work on more collaborative project procurement model. And it's where it is right now is it's still being discussed by the federal government, and we continue to place urgency on that. And we are asked is that there be mention of it in the 2024 budget, that there's more than a mention, that there's a commitment to putting this in place.
Excellent, thank you. And of course, discussions of finance, I'm going to pick on John for the next one. With costs of construction higher than, say, 5 to 10 years ago, tighter lending market, is it making more difficult to push forward with infrastructure projects? Or is that more of a concern, like the financing side on the privately funded construction projects? Are we seeing many projects being put on the shelf, or is there a view that waiting longer will just cause costs to rise even further beyond current levels, and it's better to get shovels in the ground, say, sooner rather than later? So with all that, I'll toss that bundle of words over to you, John, and get your feedback on kind of the financial picture and the market as far as how it's impacting some of the infrastructure projects.
Sure. So the short answer to everything you said is yes. Everything you said is real. It is more challenging. Interest rates, interest rates are higher. Supply chains are better, but not good, I would say. And the cost of, inflation, the cost of everything has gone up. And so as we talked about earlier, one of the key challenges in infrastructure in particular, and I do believe the infrastructure sector gets hit harder than almost any other sector in the country when it comes to this, is that because the planning cycles are so long, it just, you go through your planning cycle, you do your costing, many projects require some sort of government support. I'll use Manitoba and Thompson Airport that was ready to go in 2018 or something like that, 2019. So they got a federal grant for what they thought they needed to get it done in 2018. Well, for one reason or another, it slid and required more work, and it just got delayed. And of course, the grant as a percentage of the capex in 2018 was nowhere near sufficient in 2023. And so that created a huge gap. And sometimes we can help with that because we can come in with concessional finance, very low market, but oftentimes the cost escalation is so high that we just can't. So look, I think those organizations that have been lucky enough to contract for fixed price supply of turbines or equipment, or that have long lead batteries in many of these things, that's great. But I think the cost of labor has gone up exponentially. The cost of everything has gone up exponentially, and it's making, despite my earlier claims about, we have a very full pipeline, having a very full pipeline and dotting every I and crossing every T are two different things. And I think the financing is going to be tougher because it results in an increased demand for subsidies from provinces, from munis, from the federal government, and there's only so much to go around, and they can't be all things to all people. And because we depend on revenue generating models and we need to be repaid, the revenue of a project can only support so much of the debt that we put in. So it's not like this endless supply. It's very much tailored to what they can support, debt service. So it's tough. I think my experience is equity is in many cases being more realistic about returns because they're interested in getting projects done. There's lots that are parked on the sideline to see, how the regulatory environment shakes out. I mean, look, there's no denying that we're in a political environment here where several elections in various provinces at the federal level are always in the news. People have various views about what the results of those elections will mean for the regulatory environment. And so some capital is sitting on the sideline to see what actually shakes out. So all of those things combined make it very unpredictable and make our work more important because we're really trying to come up with bespoke solutions to specific problems, not trying to jam a square peg into a round hole and create, one size fits all solutions.
Awesome. Thank you. And before we hop into kind of an end wrap, I just want to touch on the project delivery models really quickly. I don't want to get into a discussion about preferred models, but I'm going to ask, is it safe to suggest a more defined sharing of risk will be kind of the hallmark of next generation of infrastructure projects? And I'll go to Angela for that.
Yeah, Adam, I'd say absolutely. So our approach right now is right model for the right job. And you'll see, if you look at our pipeline, you'll see a lot of TBDs on there. And that means we are still trying to figure out what is the right model for those particular projects. I think we're actively listening to the market to get some feedback in terms of what that risk appetite looks like. And frankly, we know that the outcome of this is going to be us as an owner retaining more risk than we have over the last 10 years. And what do we need to do to retool as an owner to make sure that we have the right set of skills, the right set of competencies to be able to effectively manage those risks that we're retaining. But everything from inflationary risk to geotech risk to, change, those are the types of things that we're thinking about where and how we're best positioned to manage that risk versus, say on a clean greenfield build, the construction partner might be better managed. So we are actively looking at how we build that better partnership with the market and use the full toolbox when it comes to the deployment of different delivery models.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'll go around the horn real quick. I could dive into questions, but I think the discussion here has been really good. And I'd like to just kind of get a final comment, sum it up, either a thumbs up, thumbs down, middle of the road, something real quick that you can do in like 30 seconds or so of overall expectation or mood with respect to construction maintenance of Canada's infrastructure looking ahead in the next 12 to 24 months? And I'll start with John. You're on the clock.
Very optimistic, despite some of the challenges. As I said, there's lots going on. We only do greenfield infrastructure, so the maintenance piece is. I mean, look, what I'll say is we do greenfield infrastructure, but we also have private capital in all of our deals. And so one of the benefits of having private capital in your deal is that there's a more disciplined approach to maintenance. The deferred maintenance doesn't work when you have lenders involved, because if they're going to take over an asset, they need to make it work and have it maintained. So I think there's something to be said for that model, but high degree of optimism, and looking forward to speaking to as many of you that want to reach out and talk about specific projects.
Excellent, thank you. And Mary, can I get your thoughts on 12 to 24 months?
The case for investing in infrastructure is clear. We know that Canadians all supported it. We've done research on that. So we're very optimistic. We're seeing some positive signs for immigration changes. We're seeing positive signs among owners to be more collaborative and risk sharing. We're seeing some interest in longer term planning. So we're very optimistic as well.
Excellent. And I'll go to Angela.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just demonstrated by the amount of work we have in the market, we're very bullish. And I mentioned this government has a very ambitious infrastructure agenda with a tagline of "Get it done." And so we are focused on getting it done, and again, just partnering with the market in a different way to make sure that we're maximizing value for taxpayers, and that we're able to tap into, like I said, all the tools in the toolbox.
Excellent. And Chris, I will give you the last of the summaries. Fire away.
Yeah, no, I've heard it all. Very optimistic about the next 12 to 24 months. I think the federal government is listening. They're paying attention. They're not kicking the proverbial football down the field any further. I do think there is an opportunity for sincere engagement with owners and the appropriate sharing of risk, which we've gotten away from in the past number of years. But I think advocacy has helped to correct that. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention what the federal government has done recently by passing prompt payment legislation, which will be important on all federally funded projects going forward in provinces where prompt payment legislation does not exist, where it would take precedence if it does exist. And for those who don't know, in British Columbia, we still are looking for a prompt payment legislation solution in this province. And so we're continuing to push forward on that. We think when we do have that, we'll be aligned with the rest of Canada. As you can tell by this call, we want to be aligned with the rest of Canada on infrastructure investment, on sharing of project delivery models, and just encourage to celebrate this industry that's building and maintaining this infrastructure. We all need to continue to strive to be on the same page.
Awesome, thank you. And with apologies for not diving into the question list, I'll keep some of those around though for possible story ideas, column ideas going forward. But it looks like we've reached the end of our session today. So I'd like to thank everybody who's taken their time out of their schedules to attend today. And I would really like to express our gratitude to our panelists: Chris Atchison of the BC Construction Association, John Casola of Canada Infrastructure Bank, Angela Clayton of Infrastructure Ontario, and Mary Van Buren of the Canadian Construction Association. These four individuals and their organizations were gracious enough to make time available to help foster this discussion about this critical segment of Canada's construction sector. So I do appreciate all of you for being here today. Thank you very much for the discussions that we've had. And I'd like to also thank our sponsor, LBX Company, for making this webinar possible. We appreciate your support and encourage those of you in attendance to hit their website to check out their link belt lineup of excavators, material handlers, forestry machines, and their precision grade machine guidance system, new tech for the machinery. If you tuned in late today, we've got you covered. This session has been recorded. A link to the recording is going to be sent to you within about 24 hours or so. It'll also be posted on OnSite's YouTube channel in the coming week or so. Feel free to share that video when it gets posted. Super easy to share with YouTube. And I hope everybody took some great information from today's webinar. I've got tons to write about now, so I appreciate that for sure. Once again, I'm Adam Freill, editor of Onsite Magazine. It's been my pleasure to help guide this discussion. And thank you, everybody. Have a safe and productive rest of your day. Thank you.